I'm going to call the Springfield City Council work session to order with roll call.
Mayor Van Gordon.
Here.
Councillor Weber. Here. Councillor Moe. Here. Councillor Rodley. Here. Councillor Blackwell. Here. Councillor Doyle. Here. And Councillor Pictionary.
Here, thank you.
All right, we have one item, which is the fire governance update. But before we turn it over to Chief Caven and his very large staff that he has brought with him, Neil had an update.
Just a quick intro to the item. So as you know, in 2009, the Eugene Fire and EMS Department and Springfield Fire and Life Safety commissioned a feasibility study with Emergency Services Consulting International. And then in 2010, from that study, the two cities entered into a functional consolidation. And since 2010, Eugene and Springfield have been working as a consolidated agencies. And so the next step that we're in right now is examining the governance. So in 2022, a joint governance review panel was formed consisting of Councilors Rodley and Moe from Springfield, Councilors Groves and Clark from Eugene, Springfield City Manager Nancy Newton, and Eugene City Manager Sarah Maderi. This panel has spent several months discussing the current operations and functional delivery. In August of 23, as things got very complicated to try and figure out, the city's hired AP Triton to complete the feasibility study. And Dan will run into some of those details with you as he does his presentation. The city council received an update on phase 1 in February of 2024. And this is the second update. Again, this is for information only. There's no recommended actions or votings tonight. We're just in a work session. Before I turn it over to Chief Caven, I do want to share Springfield's appreciation for Eugene Assistant City Manager Christy Hammett and LCOG's Executive Director Brenda Moore and staffs from both agencies for the incredible effort that they've put into helping Triton bring the most accurate information to the council so you can make an informed decision. So with that, I'll turn this over to Chief Caven.
Thank you, Neil, Mayor, Council. Appreciate the opportunity to be before you tonight and working with AP Triton on the governance review. As you know, we've gone back through how did we get here? Why are we here as an organization? And it's important to highlight the operational kind of excellence and efficiency and surge capacity that's come from this effort. All of the staff at ESF and myself have a tremendous amount of gratitude for our elected officials in supporting our merged organization and our overall capabilities. A lot of appreciation for Assistant City Manager Ladati, as you mentioned, Eugene staff, City Manager Newton, and all of the support staff in the cities that have helped provide the information necessary to fire staff who conveyed information to AP Triton to complete this study. We stand ready and look forward to the outcome of this process and moving our organization forward. Without further ado, I'll pass the mic to Dan Peterson from AP Triton, who's been our lead consultant among a team of experts to bring this study forward to you today.
Thank you very much. I'm really glad to be present today instead of trying to do this over Zoom. That's difficult at times. So, you know, as we go through this today, we're going to give you the executive summary of the findings, right? And we're gonna talk through that. I've got spots where I'm automatically going to pause and ask questions, but I'm encouraging you to ask as we go, right? The presentation is really what we've done everything we can to do is give both cities enough information to make the best decision individually as a city, decide what to do next in this process. That's really been a focus for us. So as we go through this, don't hesitate to let me know if you want to stop, ask a few more detailed questions on how we make that fit. But our purpose here was really to evaluate those options, right? Continue to operate as we are, one city providing service to the other, establishing an intergovernmental entity, forming a district, or dissolving the agreement. We looked at the administrative needs as well. The operational work, the evaluation of the needs in that area was outside the scope of what we worked on, or that is not a component. Ultimately, We wanted to give you ideas on what might be the best move forward. And from that, what components of an agreement would need consensus, what would be the financial implications, and what's the impact to the city, the administrative staff, for instance, that are supporting those components. The background you already covered, and I think you know this all too well, started in '07 with that 3rd Battalion, and then since 2010, the functional consolidation agreement. The functional consolidation, improved capacity. You have 16 stations that can move around. You have a more consistent, dependable, reliable response. I think most everybody seems to be well aware of that. We talked last time we were here about some of the shared admin and support functions, and that you've been able to eliminate 11.25 positions that were present in 2010 that are not now. There's a few new ones that have been staffed, but those ones are still gone, with an annual cost reduction of about 2.5 million in FY23 wages, 1.2 million of that for Eugene, 1.3 million of that for Springfield.
No, you're good. He was
Okay.
getting my pin, not my attention to ask a question.
Good. No worries. The green light helps me a lot too. So that's positive. The next part is we did about 50 visits in person when we came out earlier or late last year. And we followed up with a lot more visits with ESF, city staff, both sides. And we fundamentally came up with these desired outcomes that we really aren't going to find any one option that meets all of these, but it's really what we wanted to talk about as far as measuring each of the options towards these outcomes. So the perfect outcomes would provide single governance and administration being achieved. The operational advantages are continued, retained. Oversight by both cities are ensured. That was important. Financial impacts are manageable. The staff at ESF, their experience is positive. The impact on city administration is reduced. The sustainability is achievable. Long-term planning for ESF is achievable, and it has a reasonable time to implement. So as we walk through, we're going to look at each option and share what our findings were on each of these outcomes for those particular impacts. Moving into the continuing as currently organized, the key challenges really do remain that there's 2 separate city councils and city managers for ESF, 2 separate budgets. ESF staff are either employed by Springfield or Eugene, not by ESF. And that structure has creates complexity and inefficiency. And we heard this not just from ESF staff, but from both cities have had some of the same challenges of duplication of work and making that happen. What I did find, though, is that both cities and ESF worked really well together. They really tried their best to work through this. Some of these things just require inefficiencies because of the risk management for both cities, some of those components. And there's persistent issues that just seem to keep remaining and not really going away. The findings that we have related to continuing as currently organized, it does not provide a single governance. It retains the operational advantages that you experience today, right? The cities retain the oversight you have today. For all of the positions that keep ESF together, we feel it would be valuable to add 5 additional positions at an estimated cost of about $900,000. A deputy chief and a PIO are the top priority. A program specialist and a program coordinator are the second priority, and then a data analyst would be the third. Those are simply recommendations from our review of the actual work. The continuing is organized, that we didn't feel that the work that's today is really sustainable either for ESF or the cities. We think there's a real challenge in trying to maintain that. Each city can plan long-term, but ESF themselves can't because there's a potential termination of an agreement or a change. Those are challenging. A little bit of an enhancement, maybe with the city manager's involvement or even the budget process, could help with that, but it still becomes each city independently planning for their fire department. The time to implement is easy. It's already there. There would only be whatever enhancements that might come from that model. The key issue that we found in this is that it just doesn't appear to be a feasible option to continue in the way it is today. The staff have worked really hard for 13 years, but there continues to be challenges, and it's about as good as it might get. Few minor improvements could be made, but that wouldn't make a substantial difference. Any thoughts on this particular option or questions?
Joe,
You keep mentioning challenges. Can you spell some of those out? They're talking about persistent and seemingly not negotiable. Can you
Sure.
elaborate a little bit?
I can absolutely do that. So the budget process forces two completely separate budget processes and styles for the term to be delivered to the city. And there's really nobody looking at the full budget of ESF except for ESF. So the way that kind of blends in, the purchasing practices and policies are enough different that the ESF has to submit that to two different systems. The payroll systems are run differently. One will provide payroll kind of smoothed. The other provides payroll to the employees that is on actual hours worked. So the employees in the stations can see different paychecks and processes. In human resources, you have a fairly consistent problem where if there's a discipline action, odds are it's going to include maybe a Eugene employee, a Springfield supervisor. And so you end up getting HR involved from both cities, risk management involved in both cities for an issue that really shouldn't require that many people to manage those. Labor negotiations ends up going back and forth between the two cities for the process, which can make it difficult to move through on an agreement. The disciplinary actions like we talked about in human resources were there. Health benefits are different for the two employees. And both plans offer opportunity, but the employees don't get to pick. So they're one or the other where those fit. And the hiring process is done kind of together, but it's randomly mostly assigned for who becomes a Eugene or a Springfield employee. So those seem to be some of the challenges that those operational processes, right, and those policies create those complexities. It's pretty amazing how well the cities have tried to work together, but all it takes is a new employee in HR, and then it's like a do-over on learning the complexity of the fire department versus what it is in every other city entity.
Victoria.
Isn't there also some problems with logins when different employees get in?
There's challenges and there's some workarounds that have been done to make that possible, but the challenge is if an employee is working in one city normally and then ends up working in the other, they definitely have a challenge. But the employees that move back and forth have figured out how to make that work, right? But it's not as easy as running one department, but it is working in a manner that's needed, right? That's a good workaround that's happened. It's really unfortunate though when a person comes over to the other city and isn't up on it, they kind of get a little frustrated and maybe they don't get their work done on time. But there is a way to make those things happen. The IT departments have done their best to work around those things. Those were the highlights of the challenges.
All right, thank you.
The next option goes into one city serving the other, and this would require a revision or a new intergovernmental agreement. In essence, the day-to-day operation and employment of staff administered by one city or the other. The city managers could collaborate and work together on the direction, but fundamentally all oversight and support is provided by one city. Clearly a very simple method to address the situation. It eliminates duplication, offers some streamlined decision-making. As I walk through what we found in related to the desired outcomes, it provides a single governance. You retain the operational advantage, but we believe that the city providing the service would clearly have more decision-making authority day in, day out of the fire department. It could be minimized. It could be managed a little bit with additional collaboration, but fundamentally over time, the operation of the fire department would become that one city's responsibility, and the other city would not be as involved clearly in the process. It also needs the 5 additional positions that we are recommending, we believe. Some of the other challenges is that it does require an increased cost and potentially a challenge for the city that picks up the new employees. Not all of them felt like they had the resources to manage that. There would obviously have to be a shift in support service funding to one city or the other to manage that. Neither city would be able to just ramp up and do it without some change. The city that was not selected would need to potentially right-size some of their support services that are no longer being used. Both cities expressed concern that some of their infrastructure, some of their other components would be a challenge to down the price, reduce that price. If Springfield were to be the city that was providing the service, there'd be about a 3.2 million overall in savings from PERS and healthcare costs. The PERS and healthcare for Springfield is less expensive, but the movement of PERS employees over to Springfield from Eugene and transfer of that liability could end up impacting Springfield's PERS rate beyond the fire department. That is an unknown, but it would be something the actuaries could look at. Or if it was Eugene, there'd be a $1.2 million estimate of increase in PERS and healthcare. Both cities expressed concern that if they don't have the fire department on their health plan, there could be some sustainability issues with the health plan. There would need to be some research in that space. The city of Springfield has indicated that with some minor change, they could accommodate non-Springfield employees on the plan. But the city of Eugene has not indicated the same thing as possible. This option does streamline administrative services since it's all in a single city. And it is sustainable if the city's support services find they can manage the larger workload. It does improve some long-term planning, but it still has a limit because it's in an intergovernmental agreement, and it's an agreement that would clearly have the potential of a termination clause. And the time to get to this would be the need to assess the capacity, the cost of the transition, and the ramp up of the service by the city grabbing it. The key issues that we found on this, it's a feasible option, but with one city having more influence, both cities' elected officials, not all, but many, reflected a real concern for the loss of that. They didn't feel like this was a good option for them to have one city have more influence than the other. The ability to manage that workload, the increased cost if it was Eugene providing the service, and the potential impact on PERS related to the Springfield response to that. Any questions on this particular option?
Victoria.
So I hear the feedback on what the different cities are thinking, but has there been any talk to the actual employees and the people that are out there working as to what they think of this idea?
Well, I think for them, the fundamentally, the majority of the employees want to stay together in whatever way they can. Today, we can talk a little bit about that as well. The culture in the stations operationally pretty much has been merged. It's in their mind, they're one fire department working together. So I think you could argue that any option that can keep them together is going to be their favorite option.
Well, I appreciate that, but I'm talking about I know the healthcare is significantly different in the two cities, and things like that. So I'm wondering if the benefit or the negative to the employees has been something that you've heard or discussed with the union or the workers.
I don't know that I could accurately answer what the feeling is globally, but you could take, like if all of the employees came to Springfield and it was a different plan, you could off some of the shift in the plan from Eugene. I wouldn't argue that either plan is necessarily better than the other. I would argue it almost depends on your stage of life on which plan potentially is better. I might be able to ask the chief to comment on his thoughts on how the employees feel about, for instance, healthcare.
So I can touch, not to speak on behalf of the labor union or where they are. This has been a point of discussion for the last 14 years. That any outcome for the fire department would most likely render some type of change in particular for the Eugene staff, which enjoy a kind of, as Dan said, not a better plan per se. It's just a richer set of benefits. And so most staff understand that and understand that that's a point of either of the outcomes that see us in a different space that would require negotiation with the labor union over the impact of that transition. But generally speaking, as Dan put it, people are supportive and understanding that the future brings change in that space.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I know that for a lot of us, it just feels like as a legislative branch, we're looking at money, we're looking at that type of thing. And I think sometimes the feelings of the people that are out there actually doing the work don't get looked at. So I just want to make sure that they, that we're not picking something that they're all like, that we haven't at least looked at their input and considered it.
A lot of the people that we've talked to, like the labor group, et cetera, they've given us a number and it's unscientific, but they've indicated that, less than 3% want to see anything split up because again, they've merged their culture in the department. And at the last discussion, they even indicated probably significantly less than 3% want that. Our next area that we looked at was the intergovernmental entity, a public body, municipal corporation created through an intergovernmental agreement, granted powers through an IGA, primarily funded through city funds, can't levy taxes. Typically, formation of an IGE board of directors appointed by the cities, elected officials and city managers can be on that board, and the fire chief would typically work for that board of directors to provide for that. The findings.
Hang on, go
Yeah.
back 1 second.
Yes, sir.
And I think this is an important point, right? Is if we chose this model and we'd have to flesh out a lot of information about this model, elected officials are on the board of directors, right? City managers should be staffing it. And I don't think the city managers need to retain responsibility to hire and supervise the fire chief.
They would, and the discussion is up to you as far as how you lay that out. You can put city managers on the board. You cannot put city managers on the board. It's going to be an important discussion for you to have as a group. The goal that we're recommending is that you find a single reporting source for the fire chief and his admin.
So I think there's two pieces to it, and I understand we're going to work this out, but I want to make sure I'm clear as far as where my feedback is, right? That from a policy perspective, that we need to sort of, if the board's governing the fire department, that it's elected officials that are driving that, right? And I want to make sure that my feedback's heard on that. And when I say single form of point of contact supervising the fire chief, to me, it would be acceptable to have both city managers working together to do that. Even if they have some sort of made up entity in regards to that. But I think the fire chief's position is too important and too technical in this community to, sort of treat for essentially the elected officials to hire them.
Okay. The findings then that we had on this relate a little bit to what you represented. The single government with the IGE board is the representatives from the councils, right? The board is there. The city managers need to be in that mix somewhere, right? This system does retain operational advantage in doing this model. The city councils maintain an oversight through their representation on the board. But what we've also proposed is that you think of this IGE board more or less as putting together a recommended budget that is done earlier in the year and then presented to the councils for their portion for approval. We're not recommending that this board make a final decision or become the final decision-making authority on the budget. The budget gets recommended back to the councils. So in the packet, we're looking at the possibility of having that work done by at least March so that it can fit into the city's system for the budget process. And like the mayor said, there's a lot of work to find consensus on. We're simply giving you a couple of things to poke at and an order to process through as you go through if this is one you want. The same 5 new administrative positions are recommended here. The PERS issue is a key one on an entity. PERS recognizes an intergovernmental entity as its own entity. And one of the powers of the IGE that this brings is that both of all of the employees become IGE employees and work under this IGE. Either one of the cities could be providing the support service, or the IGE could take on some themselves. That's another discussion point as you move forward, if this is a path. But with the IGE, you have the option of becoming an independent or a pool rate employer. And what PERS does with a new employer is they take the average independent, and that becomes the rate until the actuaries can assess the new entity. And you take the average pool rate and you assess that. Pool rate is simply, and you're in the pool, and that it insulates you as a city from spikes and valleys that occur basically from things that impact PERS. Workers' comp injuries, retirements, some of those components that can create those problems insulate you from. An independent means you're simply managing those yourself. The independent average rate today would save about $4 million per year on the PERS rate combined. It's significantly low, but you need to think of that as really one-time money. It would probably be a year or two. The actuaries then would assess this new entity, look at all of the employees, look at the liability, and give it a rating. And we are estimating that it would be the same as it is today after a couple of years. But we don't know that, and we won't know that until the actuaries do that work. If you moved to the pool rate, that average rate would be a $630,000 increase. The positive thing with PERS is you can start in at the independent rate and be in the independent rate. And at any time you need to, you can move to the pool rate if you're worried about that liability. Once you go to the pool rate, you can't go back. Right? So you can count on a lower cost initially, but in September, PERS releases their new rates, and that will define what this shift would be. So in a few months, they'll come out with new rates. But generally, the new rates for ESF wouldn't apply until probably to the 2027 period, 2027 to 2029. The health insurance, if it was possible for an IGE to move and be completely covered by the health benefits in Springfield, then there's about a $1.3 million overall savings. If you move to Eugene, it's about a $580,000 increase. And again, we believe Springfield's is possible with some small changes according to your HR. Eugene, we're not so sure yet. Again, either city not providing health insurance is concerned about the sustainability of their plan. They don't know one way or the other. It's just a concern. An IGE can also get its own insurance if it wants to for health insurance. So it's an option at least to look at. This option does streamline the experience for ESF. It simplifies support services. The best option would be to have most of the support services delivered maybe by one city or the other, and then ESF picking up the remainder of those services. Over time, ESF could pick up all of those city support services, but it could also be contracted back to the cities for those issues. In this model, we're recommending facilities and apparatus be staying with the cities. The facilities are hard assets owned by the cities. They should probably stay. The apparatus for now is not a problem. The specification is the same. The maintenance program for Springfield is used by Hughes Fire Equipment. Eugene has their own. It's not a top priority to address immediately. It would be better to let the apparatus stay with the city that's got it. This offers reasonable long-term planning for ESF, but like the other options, it's an agreement that's going to have a termination option, would make it difficult to plan long-term. for ESF, but the cities could still plan long-term. We estimate about 12 to 18 months for both cities to work through the language and the needed consensus building. And then maybe that in that time also to cost out whatever option you pick so that you can make the best final decisions. We've estimated some costs, but that doesn't necessarily call true once you finish figuring out what your consensus is on your game plan. And then maybe another 3 to 6 months after that to implement. Key issues for this one, it provides a single governance. It streamlines the work for the cities. Both cities retain a voice. ESF has more singular oversight. It clearly requires a discussion on governments and representation from each city. That's going to be an important topic. Probably the first topic is to decide what is the makeup of this board of directors? What would it look like? You see the 4 million estimated savings in the first 2 years, roughly. You see a simplification of support and the ability for ESF to provide all or part of that admin support over time. And then there still remains concern about the city's health plan sustainability without the fire department. Questions on this one? Okay. The fire district, a form of local government, an independent entity, the board of directors elected from the community, primarily funded through property tax, right? It's an issue all of you are aware of. The findings that we have on this one is it does provide single governance. It does retain the operational advantages. There is no oversight from the cities in a fire district. The initial estimate we have on tax rate is $2.52, and it's a rough estimate. That ends up coming from the expenditures less revenues from that ESF generates for fiscal year 23, the taxable assessed value from fiscal year 23. It's the first year collection of tax rates, and it doesn't incorporate future collection or delinquent tax, which would add a little bit more to the revenue. It does not include an estimated capital fund or fund balance to replace apparatus equipment. It also does not address if there are needs for operational capacity increases today. That's not in here because we didn't address what they might need. If they need another engine company, if they need another ambulance, that's not in here. We don't know that that's a sure thing. We simply took fiscal year 23's actual numbers to figure out these numbers. Both cities would need to reduce an equal amount in their collection to make this work effectively for the community. Springfield in particular, you're in compression with both of your levies, and you're losing about $155,000 today on your fire levy. If you didn't reduce everything, you would make that larger. In theory, you could fold your police and fire levies into your permanent rate, eliminate your levies, and maybe even collect less than what the total cost of a fire district could be if you wanted to reduce compression issues in the city. The fire district effort streamlines a lot of components. The district could ask for support service assistance from the cities. Question?
Yeah, just going back to that question about compression, and I may want to just flag this one for the staff. That is a very complicated description that could have a lot of impacts. And I'm looking over at the city manager and the finance manager, and I don't know that everybody is agreeing that, that there's some ability that we can drop 2 levies, create a fire district, and fold it into our permanent rate. And I don't know, Nancy, if that's a fair.
I think that question is valid. I would want to talk more with the city attorney about the implications of that. And also, putting this aside on this subject, I've been involved with setting up districts before, and you want to make sure that you set that rate correctly. And so I'm a little bit concerned about setting a rate for less than the cost of delivering services. But I think, this report is kind of a starting point, and I think, I don't want to speak for the consultants, but I don't think they invested as much effort into this particular recommendation. Kind of hearing some feedback that it may not be as popular of a recommendation. So, but that doesn't negate the need to pencil out that map.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that's not going to be a popular recommendation, but as we go through this, I want to make sure we're not, some of the stuff still would have to be fleshed out. So that statement's not necessarily fully vetted, maybe?
Yeah, I would agree with you. It
Okay.
is simply a possibility.
Okay.
But even in that mode, if you don't collect your full tax rate, a future council could raise it.
Oh, and I understand compression, and this is really complicated.
It
It's
is
just joke,
extraordinarily, yes.
So this district that you spoke of, does this also have the ability to automatically increase their rates by 3% per year as allowed by districts?
They would do that, yes.
So I didn't hear that in your conversation.
Oh, okay. No, the normal every year, they would be able to collect a 3% increase on the AV. We're talking a starting tax rate. They would be at a fixed tax rate, and then that could grow 3% plus any new growth in the district. So that could be three or more unless the values came down.
Into perpetuity.
Yes. As the same as your permanent tax rate. The district, like I was mentioning, could ask for support and assistance from the cities. So it wouldn't have to be like a light switch to flip everything over. That is an option. Both cities, though, would eventually need to right size their support services for the fire department. As Nancy indicated, it's sustainable if the right tax number is indicated. We did not assess the operational capacity, and we haven't built out a capital replacement plan. We have simply given you a starting target to begin discussions if this is even an option that moves ahead. The formation obviously takes approval of the county, a vote of the people, and an election of a board. The key issue for us that we found in this is that it does a number of positive things for the community. It provides for some long-term. But I think there would be a challenge for the cities to even reduce the full amount of the fire department because of the difficulty in right-sizing the existing interdepartmental fees provided to the fire department. Those would be difficult to reduce. And really no oversight by the cities, and the formation of a new taxing authority in the city was a critical issue, not just for your council, but for both sides. So and as Nancy indicated, a lot of that conversation, we focused on this, giving enough information to see what it could look like, but there was a lot of resistance to this idea from a number of people. Some believed that whatever works is great, but there was probably a majority that felt like it was the responsibility of the council to oversee the fire department. Okay. The next option, and this is really the dissolving is probably the best path if none of these options are palatable to both cities. Like I mentioned in the beginning, our job, we felt, was to give the cities the best information they can make for their city so that they can decide what they want for their fire department. We obviously collected a lot of information from ESF, but we also met as much probably with the cities themselves. So this is the key where you would go. It would return to individual city fire departments. Eugene employees would go back to working in Eugene. Springfield employees would go back to working in Springfield. The city managers would then provide oversight for their fire department, and you could reestablish as robust a mutual aid process system as you could possibly do. Our findings in this area is that it ends up providing single governance and administration for the fire department. You do not retain the operational benefits that you enjoy today. You could reestablish mutual aid, and you could maintain some shared operational protocols, and that would help a lot on major emergencies. But it's not the same as having the same exact employees that are hired, trained, promoted, policies, et cetera, you would slowly veer off and be helpful with each other in larger events, but it would not be the same as it is today in full integration. The full oversight for each city is there. The 11.25 positions that were dropped, we went through and worked really hard with the staff. We felt that we recommend that a minimum of 8 positions be reestablished total. Eugene, we felt needs a minimum of 5 at 1.1 million, and Springfield would need a minimum of 3 at about 800,000. Springfield would need a fire chief, a deputy chief, and an executive assistant. And this is minimal, right? That we wanted to identify what we think would be just enough to get by it. It wouldn't be hard to argue for more. We're telling you what we think is the minimum amount to move forward in this direction. And this is where we talked about the culture in the stations. The staff at ESF, really very few of them are interested in this. Their culture is together. It will be a hit to the fire department if they were separated. Springfield Support Services has also allowed Eugene to manage a number of admin components, HR functions, et cetera. Those would need to be built up a little bit again so that if Springfield was to manage those, they would have to build those up. I don't anticipate that to be difficult. Just be aware that that would have to be done. It's a sustainable option, but you would not have the depth of service you have today, but it would be sustainable for the level of service operating as an individual city. Both cities can plan long-term. We would estimate you could probably make this happen in about 12 months, but the agreement you have today provides 2 fiscal years to terminate the agreement. So if both parties agreed, you could do it faster. If you relied just on the intergovernmental agreement, you could have 2 fiscal years. Our findings on the major issues here, the key issues is this is a little bit more expensive option. You lose that operational benefit from functional consolidation. The firefighters merging their culture is going to be a challenge for them. They're going to go through a difficult time to separate. Each city, though, gets to manage and oversee their own fire department. And each city streamlines their city services because now the fire department becomes just like any department as far as managing the support of those. Questions on this one? Okay. Our recommendation, the option that we feel meets the majority of the desired outcomes is that IGE option. It offers some shared governance. It offers the operational capacity that's retained. It offers oversight by the cities. You benefit from the ongoing cost reductions. You get some PERS savings, one-time savings for 1 or 2 years, probably 2. And the proposed member fee that we've modeled ensures that the costs are fair and equally distributed in that space. Any questions on this one?
So I just want to clarify,
Yes.
in this IG situation, you would have one budget and then would both councils have to approve that budget, or how does that work?
They would approve their portion, their percentage of the budget that's in shared costs.
Okay, so they're still only having to produce one
One
budget.
budget, yes.
Thank you.
Joe?
And so would one entity, or not entity, I guess I wouldn't be able to use that word anymore. Would one council or one city have voting advantage over another city under this model?
That's the discussion that you have to come up with in governance. I
Okay.
think that's going to be we put that down, if you notice in the report, as the #1 thing for you to talk about.
That's as far as I'm gonna get.
Yeah.
Until we get that resolved.
Yeah. Okay. If this is the option that you move forward with,
Steve?
yes, I'm sorry.
No, I have a comment.
I can wait.
You first.
Okay. Well, we're moving into another slide. So if you want to. Okay. Okay, very good. The implementation, should you take our recommendation, we have action plans that are in phases. The development of the IGA is the first one, and one of the very first things to talk about is governance, right? And you walk down through those issues. Once you move through the development of an IGA, and we have 20 action items on that you have to find consensus on, then you move into the cost based on what you agreed on in the IGA, validate the cost. We've estimated with our recommendations what some of those costs are going to be, but they will change potentially when you adopt a specific language inside of an IGA. And then the third set of action items is the implementation of the agreement, right? The critical issues that you have to find consensus on to make this work: governance, the role of the IGE Board of Directors, what is the baseline service delivery, and what is the member fee system that brings you back that line item cost for you. Questions on this one?
Oh, why don't you jump in, Steve?
Okay, big picture. No. It's okay. You guys are the best in the world. What I see is us coming up with a plan out there. We are responsible for the taxpayers of this city. We're elected by them to spend the money as reasonable as we can and providing fire protection. We start getting off into this system, and I think we're going to lose control. And I don't know how to do that yet, but this is one step towards that. So I have my comments about that.
Sure, sure. Well, like we talked in the beginning, we're giving you these options, right? And I can even move into this closing part, which I think will hit a bit of what you're identifying. You know, your capacity and reliability of ESF is clearly better. I think everybody agrees there. The value of the service is probably more than the savings that you've achieved. We are recommending the IG as the best option because it hits the majority of the desired outcomes. However, if either city as a group cannot find the value, we recommend the dissolution of the functional consolidation. And we have very detailed plans to walk through a dissolution so that you can maintain relationships and respect the process in a way that allows you to do that. We are encouraged by what the IGE can offer you in delivering those shared service models. We think that's a really positive thing for each city, but we also believe that you have the responsibility to decide what's best for Springfield and Eugene for Eugene. And that's what we've done our best to present to you in this report.
Go ahead, Steve.
This is not the answer, but we had 2 independent fire departments. And we had an independent ambulance agency, and they went broke. Dennis Murphy stepped in there and suggested we merge these fire departments on a trial basis to see where things would go. 17 years ago, it has evolved and evolved and evolved, and nobody's had any control over it. You guys have, but we haven't. And so we're at this situation right now where I don't know if we can get out of it or not, but I know that's how we got into it. And to be responsible to our voters, we need to address that.
Okay, before I open it up, and you're going to have a lot of different takes and opinions and questions, is there something specific that you're looking for from our conversation? Like, Nancy first.
Just one observation. This elected body has the opportunity to voice any concerns and upon the issue of control, like nobody's had any control. I would suggest that you do have control as part of the annual budget process. You control what the budget allocation is. You can approve or deny positions. You control appointing me and I partially supervise the fire chief. So other questions about control, and I understand changes, that's a key question. But I think if you were to go with this, and I'm not trying to advocate anyway, you would address those by very tightly written agreement. But I just wanted to put a clarification on the record about times where this council does exercise and can exercise control over this department.
And I think to me, the IGA is on the table, but the challenge I have with the presentation and the report, and I know there's a ton of material coming our way over there for a little bit of summertime reading, is there's not really a lot of detail in, like, to a certain extent, the IGA as an option is, you know, the most complicated because there's no structure to it. And so as we start the conversation, I want to kind of acknowledge that depending on what some of those details are, could sway the conversation between the elected officials quite a bit. And so that's an open question in my mind. Go ahead, Corey.
Thank you. And I think it just kind of, just thinking about this word control, going through this process, I think gives us the opportunity to actually have more control and more defined control, because the way it's been actually functioning is, you know, we have our little chunk of the budget that we do, and we get a report from the police chief, or when we need to buy a new apparatus, we have to sort of piece that together. But I think the idea of having like regular oversight and getting really clear about the role of the city managers is actually gonna, in my mind and in my opinion, gives us more control, because we're going to be paying closer attention, because we've built the infrastructure to do that. So for me, I think it ties up a lot of the looseness that has started to happen over the last few years. Thank you.
Anybody else? Go ahead, Victoria.
Well, first off, I want to thank you and the other members that have been on this and working on it for all this time. I mean, was one of the things that really concerned me when I ran for city council. And I think that I understand how this began, as Councilor Mo said, but here we are 17 years later. And to me, the idea of blowing that up for those folks that have created that culture, you know, the police departments and the fire departments have a completely different culture that, you know, a lot of people don't understand, I think, in the general public. It's not like a regular work environment. And so I think that that's why I have these concerns, and I'm mentioning them because I think it's so important that we keep that in mind. And so for me, the idea of just splitting it up again, when I know that less than 3% of folks are in favor of that, really concerns me a lot. I like the IGA and the IGE both. I think those are both valid ideas. I think that whatever we can do to make this more streamlined and more concise and less work is a good thing. So I'm willing to keep hearing more about it. Thank you.
Beth.
I completely agree with that. And I feel like I want to hear more about it. It's really complicated and there's a lot of layers to it. So trying to read through here and figure out, you know, costs, and there's so many unknowns that it's hard to completely grasp, but keeping, you know, the department together, especially if that is the need and the want of the employees, I can understand that and see that. And so I'd like to see what this looks like a little more. But again, there's just a lot of unanswered and what ifs and how that can work out. So, but I'm interested.
And I can speak to this is an executive summary report. The report itself has well over 200 pages of detail that you did not want me to go through tonight, right? That report.
The night's still young.
That report it will be in technical review we've done some final things after the governance review panel. That'll be in technical review with the cities, and then how that moves forward. A lot of your questions will be answered in there, but some of those questions could not be answered until until there would be consensus found in some parts. But a lot of what you're looking for is in there if you choose to dig.
Okay. Anybody else? Well, Michelle.
Just how we do this is going to be very, very important. Keeping an open mind, respecting both sides of the conversation is really critical. I'm committed to doing that if that's what it takes to support our fire department in the way that helps them move forward in a positive way and keep their culture and all of those really important things. I'm just, I guess, asking for anyone who's going to be involved in that conversation to really be open-minded.
Corey.
Thank you. And I think, again, I appreciate Councilor Doyle's appreciation, because
this has been like 3.5 years of work that we've been working through this, and we've come to some blocks and some stumbling places, and we've had to regroup. And I think one of the things that I said in the last review panel meeting is now we're at a point where for me, it's important for us to hear from our Springfield finance staff and our city manager, because those PERS and those insurance pieces are going to be a big part of the conversation. And so I'm really interested to know. And I think one of the things that I shared with Brenda at LCOG is we're here to represent Springfield, and we need to allow some space for our partners in Eugene to figure out, because like, as you mentioned, they're still trying to figure out how it affects them in some places. And so we're not going to be able to really get into that conversation about the IGE until they know what the gains and losses are for them, and we know what the gains and losses are for us. And so now it's like where we get to lean on and trust our staff and the collaboration to work those pieces out so we get to that conversation. Thank you.
All right, I've got a couple more pieces of feedback, and then we can talk about like, where do we go from? Oh,
Just short.
go ahead.
The finance part, that's the part that's been concerning me all along. Nathan is our finance person. I trust him completely. And I hope that he looks at these numbers and comes up with what is going on, how it's going to affect us, and what our future will be. And I know he can do that. So I hope that we start on our end, look at that.
All right, let me ask one kind of clarifying question about sort of next steps. I know you're meeting with our colleagues in Eugene next week. So after that's done, we all sort of break for the summer roughly. Then what happens?
Like this one is one that I should field. So I think that, obviously this is a lot of information to digest. I would, depending on your appetite for summer reading, I feel like a teacher assigning summer reading, but we could certainly provide you with the full report. So if you really want to dig into some of the foundational data that this executive summary represents, you can do that and get a little prepped up for a future discussion in the fall. We also need to check in with our partner in Eugene and talk about what their schedule is like as well. And then I suggest that we break this into manageable chunks of information. One, just kind of a decision point on recommendation that have been presenting to you this evening. I mean, I know this is not something we can really decide in one evening, and I understand that. So the intent here is you can have summer, do more reading, think about it some more. Even, talk to myself, talk to other, and we would certainly be looking into as much as possible some of these questions regarding PERS rate and also any kind of the health insurance. However, I do want to put a caveat on that, because sometimes PERS rates can be a little squirrely to estimate. So I'll just leave that there. I don't work for PERS. I'm not going to be disparaging. And then so the starting point would be, okay, what is the model? And then working that into a series of decisions, probably starting right off with governance, because to me, that would be the one that would be the most likely to derail an option of an IGE if both councils couldn't come to consensus on how that would be constructed. So I suggest that, don't let the enormity of the issue overwhelm you. We can do hard things. We have done hard things. And that would be our first steps.
So I think there's a couple things that are important. So it sounds like it's not really until the fall do we start kind of removing options from consideration. That way we have time so that both jurisdictions can see the information. The other thing that I'm concerned about when we read it is just thinking about the price at the end of it. Sometimes we start these decisions without really knowing what the final price is going to be. And, I know it may have to come in a sort of linear order of sort of like governance, price, et cetera. And then I think the two components of costs that I want to hear about are really the conversion costs, and then sort of like either 5 or 10 years out, right? Like, let's just test whether or not whatever decision we make is creating a structural problem for us, down the road. I think that's an important part of this as well. no matter what, right? Like do nothing or, well, the separate departments is, always got to stay on the table, right? Because I think that's everybody's fallback position if we can't sort of figure this out. The IGA portion, when I think about it, fleshing out that governance model is critical to saying, figuring out if whether or not we support it. And the things that are important to me, and I cannot state this enough, is that if the elected officials, right, the staff for that board has got to be some group or delegate of the city managers, because the entire system between between the two cities works through the city manager, and that is a critical part for it to be successful. And those two city managers together have to be the one that is supervising the fire chief. The other thing I'm conscientious about, like the voting political portion, that's going to be something that is going to be a little bit tricky that we were going to have to sort out, but we have good models to look at, like with the MPC, that have sort of veto options and ways to protect your priorities and work together. And then the last thing that I think is important is budgets need to work bottom up here, right? So effectively, we still need to leave the councils in control for choosing service level for their constituents and for their communities, and using the cities as a way to sort of push up that final budget. You use the term like membership fees. And I get it, right? We're starting to construct this for the first time. But to me, the final vision of this is like really the councils have to really set the service level and kind of push it up towards the board to finally adopt it. And that way you're, again, protecting the council's ability to look holistically in their community for what they need. And then the city manager's ability to administer the whole picture, as we support this. And lastly, I just want to point out, I know we've been talking about PERS rates, how finance is engaged, right? Like, how do we support the employees? The amount of stakeholders here is insurmountable, right? But let's not forget that we're ultimately serving the public, right? So ultimately, the thing that's guiding my decision is like, at the end of the day, what is best for the Springfield public? And Eugene's going to, weigh what their public needs are. This is really complicated. And so I really appreciate the effort. I know we're kind of talking through these different conversations, and I feel like we're beginning to repeat ourselves. And now I'm kind of interested in, how does that feedback start to show its way up in the documents that the project's producing? And my last question, and then I'll end with this, is no matter whatever decision we make here, it still seems like it's like 2 years of implementation, right? This is like, it's not going to just happen overnight, right? Okay, I'm hearing nods. Okay.
I'll agree on that.
And the sooner, I think everybody's going to be more comfortable, the sooner we officially can take the fire, the district off the table, right? Like, and the other one that can probably go that, again, ultimately my opinion is that one service, one city contracts with another. Those are like, I can see how the construction physically works, but the politics of those are going to be really difficult for people. And, the sooner we're able to start whittling down this list, I think it's going to help everybody. Anybody else? Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and put it out there. I think the most interest I have is to learn more on the IGA. That's not off the table for me, and neither is the dissolution of our relationship. Neither one of those are off the table for me, but I'm definitely open to hear about more of the other with the IGA. The other ones I don't see, for me, I couldn't support the other options. They just don't make sense to me. So I would love to hear, the more information in that area, the better, for be able to help me make a decision.
Okay, I'm looking around for any last minute, Neil.
Just Mayor, quickly, I just wanted to again thank Councilors Rodley and Mo for their work. And thanks to City Manager Newton for her feedback at every step. And then thanks to Dan and his crew. There's not a line in this executive summary that we didn't have a conversation or an argument or pushback, and we worked a way to get it into the document. And then there's a 200-page data-rich document that all of the staff here at the city on every page had questions, including Nathan, including our partners in Eugene. So appreciate Dan coming in at, as we were halfway through, and really working with two cities that really are doing everything they can to make sure we get the best that we can get. And so appreciate that, Dan, and your staff.
Well, thank you guys so much. Do we want the full report for over the summer reading? I'm seeing some head nods. No, well, I wasn't gonna say that.
Mayor, we have that, and we also have a website where you can view the previous meetings and have all of the information.
Perfect. Always good to see you, Chief. Come by anytime.
I appreciate the opportunity and your support.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We're adjourned.
Be safe.
I'm going to call the Springfield City Council regular session to order with roll call.
Mayor Van Gordon,
Here.
Counselor Weber,
Here.
Counselor Mo,
Here.
Counselor Radley,
Here.
Counselor Blackwell,
Here.
Counselor Doyle,
Here.
and Counselor Pictionary.
Here, thank you.
Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. There's 2 times designated for public testimony this evening under public hearings and business from the audience. If you are attending in person, please complete the request to speak card located at the front of the council chambers and turn them into the city recorder. If you're joining us online with tablets, smartphone, or computer and wish to speak either of those times, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom. The order of public testimony is as follows. Anyone who is in person in the city council chambers, and then anyone who has raised their hand. And for the record, we are pulling item 1 under business from the city manager. The city manager and sub streetlight IGA. It's going to be brought back to us in the fall of 2024. There's additional work to be done on the item. First item, please.
First item is the consent calendar.
I move to make a motion to approve this consent calendar.
Second.
Neil, could you call the vote, please?
Yes, Counselor Weber,
Yes.
Counselor Mo,
Yes.
Counselor Radley,
Yes.
Counselor Blackwell,
Yes.
Counselor Doyle,
Aye.
and Counselor Pictionary.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes 6 yeses, 0 nos. I want to acknowledge our partners from Willamette Lane here. You guys got it done. It's a little anticlimactic. Next item, please.
Next item is public hearings. You have 2 public hearings this evening. Public hearing number 1 is the wastewater master plan, and Jeff Pascal is here for this item, and Molly Markarian.
Good evening, Mayor, councilors. I'm Molly Markarian, Senior Planner and the city's project manager for the wastewater master plan update project. As Neil mentioned, Jeff Pascal, formerly city engineer and now the community development manager, is also here tonight for this item. During your June 24th work session, we provided an overview of this project to update the city's wastewater master plan, highlighted plan content, and summarized community outreach and feedback themes. We also answered council questions and acknowledged city council comments. Tonight, the final draft 2024-2045 wastewater master plan is moving into the formal adoption process with the city council public hearing. Following tonight's public hearing, staff will finalize the plan and present an adoption resolution to council in the fall. Finalization of the plan will address any public testimony received tonight and city council direction, in addition to addressing items that were noted by city staff and agency partners following the release of the final draft plan this spring. Specifically, a project numbering error in the capital improvements program recommendations and other minor errors, and also more substantially incorporating the Thurston Road System Expansion Project into the 20-year capital improvements program list. For context, this project was identified in the 2008 wastewater master plan and was considered by the project team as having low potential to occur during the planning period in early 2023 when we analyzed the previously identified projects that had not been completed. Since then, the city has received and processed annexation applications for property, the ultimate development of which will require said extension. Given that the capacity need is captured in the hydraulic model, since the project team conservatively modeled based on full annexation and build out of Springfield's urban growth boundary, or UGB, it now makes sense to update the project list, as it is now highly likely that this extension will be needed in the 20-year planning period, and the extension would be potentially eligible for systems development charges credits in the future. At this time, staff recommends that the City Council conduct a public hearing on the final draft 2024 to 2045 wastewater master plan. Thank you.
All right, any questions for Molly before I open the public hearing? I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. I have no cards for this item. Neil, do we have anybody online wishing to speak to this item?
Appears we have no hands for this item.
I close the public hearing. There's no action requested. Adoption scheduled for fall 2024. Please read the next item.
Public hearing number 2 is annexation of territory to the city of Springfield. Annex approximately 2.44 acres of industrial property in Glenwood located at 3331 Franklin Boulevard, map 17-03-34-33, tax lot 100. Andy Limbert is here for this item.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. Previously, staff had requested that this item be continued, the public hearing and the record be continued to this evening's meeting in the anticipation of receiving some additional information from the applicant regarding some concerns about the annexation agreement. We did receive response from the applicant's counsel at the end of last week, and that was after the council packet had been prepared, and it did not give staff adequate time to review and respond. Therefore, we are recommending that this item be continued to the next regular meeting of council, which is on September 3rd. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? And we're expecting that by September 3rd, this is going to be ready to move.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it will be ready. It will be ready to be concluded on September 3rd.
All right. Thanks, Andy. The public hearing is still open. I do not have any cards for this item.
Or no hands for this item.
All right. So we are going to continue the public hearing to September 3rd, 2024. Next item, please.
Your next item is business from the audience.
I have one. I have multiple cards. First card is Jason Profit, and I do have some pictures that I will hand out that Jason gave us. So we've got them. I just have to distribute them. State your name and location for the record.
Jason Profit, 657 Quarry up underneath the water tower. And I want to start with saying thanks to the city for re-rocking the road after the ice storm. Wasn't quite enough rock, but it was better than what it was. They missed a pretty deep mud hole there. Where the mayor walked in during the ice storm, I think it'd be 7th Street. I think somebody's growing cannabis in there. There's an awful strong skunky smell. You guys good in that area? Be careful. The mayor knows where the trail is up there. The pictures that I handed out is the east of my property, which belongs to the city. I used to maintain that before my back surgery. My realtor is asking for this area to be cleaned up on the east, west, and south is Stub. Deanna Starr is the contact there. The blackberries are 5 feet high in there. They're at least chest high on me. I'd like to see the city spend some money and do some maintenance up there. In 12 years that I've been on that property, I've never seen the city come in and cut that east side or the west side. I'd like to see for fire danger, I'd like to see it brought up to Oregon Department of Forestry standards where they say lift everything up off the ground. Right now, there could be a homeless camp in there, you couldn't see it. On either side, the east or the west side. The east side is actually, I believe, the original rock quarry. Steve might be able to confirm that. It's underneath the water tower. I heard there was an old house in there. at one point. So I talked with code enforcement. They're not gonna do anything but pass it to operations. And I think it goes to the bottom of the pile. This, nothing gets done up around my place. I had the brush cutter up there once last year. Park Street, Fifth and Sixth needs to be cut back, and there's stuff that I put in ribbon down at Booth Kelly by the railroad track from the snow break. And that's gonna be my last question is, how come Booth Kelly entrance doesn't look like Mountain Gate? I was just out there this morning. I mean, we're overgrown. It looks pretty bad. Thank you.
Thank you. Next card is Marissa. It's still not active. You gotta hit the button and it'll go green. There you go.
Okay, thank you so much. Hello, my name is Marissa Zarate. I'm the co-executive director of Plaza de Nuestra Comunidad, and I'm here to speak as to the adjustment of the CDBG funds. And I'm here to share a little bit about Plaza. Some of you may know us as Centro Latinoamericano, Downtown Languages, or Huerto de la Familia. We have longstanding relationships with the city of Springfield, with Willamette, the school district, and a few years ago, we decided to bring our organizations together to create a new immigrant and Latino serving nonprofit to be able to combine our efforts and have a bigger impact. As Plaza, we provide a whole range of services, including community gardens, mental health services in Spanish. We help start small businesses. We have family literacy programs where parents and their kids attend together to get educational activities and more. One of the projects we've taken on as part of the merger is looking for a space for our wellness center. And that is a place to have our Spanish language therapists and our Spanish language addiction treatment program, to be able to have a place that's meant for clinical services and dedicated to that purpose. While pursuing that, we found a property at Centennial that previously belonged to Willamette family, or they were renting it. And we've purchased that property. So we're very excited to create this new resource for the community here in Springfield and increase our partnerships here locally. And as part of that, we've undergone a huge project with the purchase and now preparing the space to be a good trauma-informed space for community members to access the care that they need and to have equitable access to services that are available in Spanish that would not be available otherwise without us. So we're here today asking for support in the form of an amendment to the CDBG funds. And I wanted to share a little bit of context about our organization going into that conversation so that you know more about us, and especially with Plaza de Nuestra Comunidad being a new name, making sure that you knew that we are long established organizations here in our community with, I think, 80 years between the three organizations, many years, hundreds and thousands of people, or not hundreds of thousands, pardon, thousands of people, hundreds of families served every year, many of them for decades, and we're there to meet immediate needs and also help people think about the future with some of our programs like the gardens or helping launch businesses. So we appreciate your consideration during the CDBG fund conversation, and some of my colleagues will be here to talk a little bit more about what that looks like for us. But we wanted to make sure that you understood the purpose of this was really to create a culturally specific, accessible location for folks to access crucial mental health services and addiction treatment services that are not available otherwise in our community. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you. The next card I have is Justin. You gotta hit it one more time. Oop, there you go.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. My name is Justin Schmick. I'm a local real estate professional. I had a chance to sit in on the May 29th Community Advisory Committee meeting for the CBG funds that are being discussed this evening. I'm here to share what I observed at that meeting. First, there's a lot of need in our community. Two organizations came and spoke about what they would do with the funds, and you could tell there's some need out there. Second, The committee members and staff talked about it. It's a use it or lose it system. For whatever reason, the circumstances are, if the funds don't get used, the HUD can take them away and send them to another state. Third, if you don't use the funds, what the committee members and staff talked about was it could penalize you in the future for getting HUD funds. So I'm encouraging everyone to see what we can do with that tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person is Timothy Herrera.
Good evening, City Council. I wanted to talk today about the context of this project. This project aims to create a bilingual substance use disorder treatment and mental health clinic at 1621 Centennial Boulevard. The addiction treatment and mental health services offered at this location will be open to the public during our business hours, and the majority of our clients are low to medium income. According to the 2020 National Survey on Drug Use and Health by the Federal Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, the state of Oregon has the second to worst overall addiction rates nationwide, with nearly 1 in 5 teens and adults reporting a problem with drugs and alcohol. And in 2022, Oregon ranked last in treatment options. Substance use disorders affect individuals from all backgrounds, including Spanish-speaking communities in Oregon. However, linguistic and cultural barriers can create significant challenges in accessing substance use disorder services, exacerbating health disparities. And many Spanish-speaking individuals in Oregon face language barriers when seeking this type of treatment. So this wellness center is highly needed in our community to address this epidemic locally and to ensure that Spanish-speaking community members who are disproportionately impacted by health outcomes are able to access mental health services and treatment programs. Providers who speak Spanish or offer interpretation services can improve access to care and facilitate more effective communication. Substance use disorder services should be tailored to the unique cultural, social, and economic contexts of Spanish-speaking and bilingual communities, and Plaza is aware of cultural nuances, values, and beliefs that may influence treatment outcomes. Bilingual staff can improve the quality of care and increase the likelihood of successful treatment outcomes. So the Plaza Wellness Center in Springfield is essential for providing trauma-informed, culturally relevant services, building social cohesion, and enhancing public health, especially since there are no other such services currently being offered in Spanish in Springfield. And the space has been specifically designed for the provision of trauma-informed care, and the location was carefully selected in order to ensure accessibility to all community members. So thank you for considering this amendment to the CDBG funds. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no other cards. Neil, do we have anybody online?
No hands for this item.
All right, is there any council response? Joe?
If I can, I have a couple questions just for clarification, and I think it's wonderful what you folks are doing. But you mentioned it's open to the public. I'm curious, anybody coming in regardless of their ethnicity would be welcome?
Yeah.
Number one.
Go, why don't you ask all your questions?
Yeah, number one. And then number two, I'd like to know, as far as the money it's being spent, what is it earmarked for as far as expenditures? Is it going to go to its professional services or to the physical structure of that building?
So why don't we do this? Because I think a lot of people have questions about the different programs recommended for CDBG. When we call the item after the staff presentation, we can have both groups up and let us ask some questions.
Okay, thank you.
Any other council response? All right, next item.
Next item under resolutions is general obligation bond authorization. Nathan Bell is here for this item.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The item in front of you this evening is a request to not adopt a resolution authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds. In February of 2024, Council authorized a referral to voters ballot measure authorizing the issuance of up to $20 million in general obligation bonds for the purpose of fixing certain streets. On May 21st, voters approved that ballot measure. This item tonight is the last step for you that's going to allow staff to move forward with issuing those bonds. We anticipate completing that issuance sometime in mid to late August. So any questions?
Are there any questions? Joe?
I'd like to happily make a motion to adopt a resolution of the city of Springfield, Oregon, authorizing the sale of general obligation bonds.
Second.
Could you call the vote, please?
Yes, Counselor Weber.
Yes.
Counselor Mo.
Yes.
Counselor Rodley.
Yes.
Counselor Blackwell.
Yes.
Counselor Doyle.
Absolutely.
And Counselor Pictionary.
Yes.
Motion passes 6 yeses, 0 nos. And again, thank you to the public for trusting us with this. Our streets definitely do need to work. Next item, please.
Next item is resolution number 2, vertical housing tax credit for 448 Main Street. And Jeff Pascal is here for this item.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you, you have a request to move to adopt or not adopt a resolution for approval of the application of vertical housing tax credit. We'll walk through a little bit of the application in the packet. Because this is the first one that we've received, that we've processed, that we've had a process. So we don't really have an application process. So basically what you'll see is in the council briefing memo, which outlines all the criteria, it goes through and gives the staff review of the applicant's materials per that credit outlined in the ORSs, the Oregon Revised Statutes. So in 2004, council did create a vertical housing zone. It's the downtown area. You can also see the 4 criteria that are required to be met for approval or certification by the council. And that's 1, the project must be wholly within the zone, which it is. The project must maintain an exemption multiplier of at least 1.0, and you'll see in there they're above 2.0 in that material. One thing you'll note is there's a discrepancy between the numbers they submitted and what we calculated off of their building plans. That is because they were calculating the live work unit, and per the Oregon statutes, that does not qualify as fully residential. And so that was subtracted out of their calculation. If you look at when you look at that, it didn't make when you look at the numbers, it wasn't, I think when it came down to it was 1%. I think before the subtraction, it was 42%. With the subtraction, it's 41%. So it's not as far as a big number. The construction and rehabilitation must be started on all of the buildings. We can all see 448 Main, they're almost done with that project, and I think they're getting ready to start leasing. And at least 50% of the project's ground floor fronts primary public streets. So through all of that evaluation and looking at the application, there's the staff recommendation to approve certification by the council.
Corey.
Thank you, and thank you for this. I'm curious because you mentioned that this, and this is coming to us from Masaka Properties. And I'm curious because this has come up before when we've talked about these things. Do you have an idea of like how much staff time went into this? Because I know we've asked before about how much time does it actually take, and what are we actually yet? So I'm just curious as to how much staff time went into the processing of this to get it to us, if you have an estimation. Thank you.
I would estimate between meetings and everything we've had, it was probably about a week's worth of work for 1 FTE to come up with the full report. Now, part of that I will put out there is the fact that over the life of this program being in place, we haven't received any applications. So part of that staff time was just like looking at it and going, what are we going to do to process this and make sure that we provide the council with the best material possible and a full evaluation. So that's probably not a very fair way of saying that versus some of our other land use applications where we really have a rigid application process and we process a lot of them. And so we have a full understanding of what we're doing.
Victoria.
So with that said, does that mean that you now have a template or an SOP for handling these? Because we're kind of hoping that maybe more come along. Or are you thinking this is a one-off that we're probably not going to see again?
So if you recall, as part of the housing diversity tax exemption, one of the recommendations was to repeal this and in essence replace it with that. So we received this application before council had taken full action on that. So we'll come back, and we will probably come back sometime later this fall to finalize that repeal of this, so I don't anticipate getting any new ones in the meantime. But yeah, we do have a little bit more of a process, or at least an understanding of the rules and everything that goes into it. So, but yeah, that was always in the intent. We just received this application before all of that. So the decision and the recommendation was to go ahead and process this application and not repeal the vertical housing tax exemption.
I don't think we have any more questions. Joe?
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the resolution to approve the application for the vertical housing tax credit for 448 Main Street.
Second,
Neil, could you call a vote?
Yes, Counselor Weber,
Yes.
Counselor Mo,
Yes.
Counselor Rodley,
yes.
Counselor Blackwell,
Yes.
Counselor Doyle,
Aye.
and Counselor Pictionary.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes 6 yeses, 0 nos. Next item.
Next item is the TGM grant resolution of support. Drew Larson is here for this item.
Good evening, Counselor, Mr. Mayor. My name is Drew Larson, Senior Transportation Planner with the City of Springfield. And tonight, I'm excited to share with you a proposal to pursue a grant through the state's Transportation Growth Management Program, specifically aimed at funding a bicycle and pedestrian master plan for our city. So staff is committed to enhancing our transportation infrastructure in accordance with our existing transportation system plan, which emphasizes economic vitality, sustainable land use, and maintaining an efficient transportation network. Further, the proposed plan, if awarded funding, would achieve several policies of the TSP, including enhancing infrastructure to accommodate diverse populations, including those with disabilities, maintaining safe and efficient bike and pedestrian systems, ensuring continuous transportation network with direct travel routes for all modes, addressing the mobility and safety needs of all users, and creating a pedestrian-friendly environment that enhances safety, comfort, and convenience by removing barriers and providing direct routes. Securing this grant would be a significant opportunity for us to integrate a more robust bicycle and pedestrian planning into our broader transportation strategy. It will enable us to develop a comprehensive bicycle and pedestrian master plan that aligns closely with our TSP goals and policies. To proceed, we kindly request that City Council support the passage of a resolution of support. This resolution demonstrates Springfield's commitment to providing the required local match of 10.27%, primarily provided through in-kind staff time, and ensuring that the project is well prepared and poised for adoption. If Springfield is awarded funding through the program, staff plans to regularly check in with City Council on our progress and seek your input to guide our efforts effectively. Thank you, and I'm available for any questions.
Joe?
Thank you, Drew. I'm gotta ask, this master plan that you want to draft, is there any part of that is in recognition or to comply with mandates by state? Or is it something that we are dreaming up? And is it something that's going to significantly increase the number of bike paths on our streets and roadways, et cetera, and impact our traffic?
So I heard two questions in there. First, one, our transportation system plan does call for more robust planning, but with the climate friendly and equitable community rules, there are new mandates within them that do include full planning of a bicycle and pedestrian network with a final build out plan. And so while the TPR, the transportation planning rule, included bicycle and pedestrian planning, it didn't include this level of commitment. It was more of a provide for, have some policies in there that support bikes and peds. Now, the new TPR regulations from CFEC, climate friendly and equitable communities, do require additional planning efforts, identifying gaps, doing it equitably, and providing a full build out plan.
So the answer is
yes and no. I mean, we do not have a plan that identifies all the gaps and provides a full network plan as required by the TPR. And the TPR did change with climate friendly and equitable communities to include these elements.
So after this plan is made, or if we get awarded that and you create this plan, is then now Springfield compelled to complete whatever is drafted in that plan?
My understanding is that it does require a plan for full build out of the plan.
Hey, hang on, Joe. I think Nancy's trying to jump on
So
here.
please, Nancy, you know where I'm at.
I
I'm
do
not
know.
gonna sit there and
I
I don't want green lanes throughout the city compared to other
understand that,
cities.
Council. I was trying to flag the mayor and thank you. I think Christina and I were on the same wavelength. Thank you, Drew, for your presentation and your work on this. Irrespective, we have CFAC in front of us and we're working on the other issue on a parallel track. And at the same time, we have to comply with its rules. I don't consider this to be an overreach, I guess would be my, to get to your point about, is this kind of a self-driven plan or is this something that we're going to be mandated, that we're mandated to do? I would say it's fair to say at this point in time, it's a mandate attached to CFAC. We're challenging that, but that's a different discussion. The other part is, does the creation of a plan obligate the city to build the plan? And I would say, you can create the planning document, but as far as the full build out, it's a multi-year horizon. So you can't financially obligate a future council, if that makes sense. And Christina will explain this legally better than me.
All right, Christina.
I think that's the general premise is correct, that adopting comprehensive plans does not obligate the city to carry out those improvements. However, the bicycle and pedestrian plan could be a useful tool for the council to have options. Under the CFAC rules, the council, as part of the Eugene Springfield metropolitan area, is required to do regional scenario planning, which includes performance measures that the council will have a say in adopting. If you have a completed bicycle and pedestrian master plan, that can be a tool to selecting potentially some of those improvements as your performance measures, in which case they could become binding under the CFAC rules, in that the rules require the council to act on the performance measures that you take. So that's a very complicated way to say, generally, it doesn't carry an obligation, but there are ways that the council could decide to obligate itself to this plan in the future, but that would be a decision of council if that were the case. So it would not be without specific council decision-making.
Okay, so it sounded like from Drew that we would be obligated, and it sounds like from City Manager Newton that we're not, and it sounds like for you that we have some off ramps, and I'm just was wanting to make sure, because I know that CFAC, and hopefully we win, and that but I find it very hard to believe that someone's going to hand you a bucket of cash and say, well, please do this, but we're not going to make you do it when you're done. And it seems like that's an investment that some entities making, and for that grant says, we want you to do what you plan to do.
Well, to the extent that the city constructs improvements, they would need to adhere to the plan. So I think Drew and Nancy are correct in that, the city couldn't decide to undertake a massive infrastructure project and then not provide the bike ped improvements that are geographically identified for that location, unless the council were to make very specific findings under transportation system planning rule that those improvements aren't needed, which is unlikely to happen if we've just done a plan showing that they're needed. But also Nancy's correct that the fact that we have a plan does not obligate us to make the infrastructure improvements to begin with. So it's both. It's, if we have a plan in place, then as we construct infrastructure, which we can't be forced to do, then we have to make that infrastructure consistent with the plan.
Okay.
So I hope that makes sense.
I'll regurgitate it for a while, but
Sorry if that's too much legalese or attorney.
I enjoy that. No, it's fine.
All right, any other questions? All right.
It's my turn to make a motion here, so I'd like to make a motion to adopt a resolution of the city of Springfield to support a transportation growth management TGM grant application for creation of a Springfield bicycle and pedestrian master plan.
Second.
Neil, could you call the vote, please?
Yes, Counselor Weber,
Yes.
Counselor Mo,
Yes.
Counselor Rodley,
Yes.
Counselor Blackwell,
Yes.
Counselor Doyle,
Yes.
and Counselor Pictionary.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes 6 yeses, 0 nos. Next item, please.
Any business from the city council?
Any business from the city council? Anybody else? Joe?
No, I just want to make sure we didn't go without today without mentioning the Olympics competition right downtown here just day before yesterday was so awesome. If you didn't get to see it, it was a mistake if you could have gone. But it was really wonderful to see the sport. Really wonderful to see all the different people from the different communities and different countries and all the competitors. It was just a very, very nice feeling downtown like it was a few years ago, but I really enjoyed that.
I've already committed that any tours of downtown in the future will be in a race walk style. Anybody else?
With him leading.
All right, next item, please.
Next item is business from the city manager. Mayor, as you mentioned, item number 1, the city and Sub Streetlight intergovernmental agreement has been pulled and we pushed back out to the fall. Item 2 is community development block grant substantial amendments. Aaron Fifield is here for this item.
And I think Nancy, you wanted to make a couple of comments on this item before we got started.
I did. Thank you, Mayor. So tonight we're coming back to you from our prior work session. I believe that was on June 17th. And I recognize that the materials are not as tight as I would like them to be because we were turning these around quickly. And apologies for packing everything in right before you go on break, but that's kind of the nature of this work. So I do appreciate Aaron, though, going back and looking at the committee notes and adding some more context around the discussion, because I think some of your comments centered around what was the committee contemplating with some of their different decision-making. I also want to recognize Councillor Mo's participation as your liaison, so he can be a reference as well. I do want to say, per your input, we are suggesting the addition of the ADA restroom in City Hall. Councillor Pictionary, I know that's something that you pointed out last time. We don't have final numbers on that, so it's one of these situations where I'm asking you to don't let perfect be the enemy of good. If you are on board with the concepts of some of the things that we're doing, I'd like your permission for staff to start moving on this so that we can expend the federal funding. And I think it was previously mentioned in business from the audience that it is a use it or lose it type of situation. And I would prefer improvements to be happening in Springfield. And I think that is it. Other than I think we do have it appears we may have some people in the audience that could answer questions should council want to go a little bit deeper with some of your individual thoughts.
So Aaron, if you want to add some comments and then maybe we can have folks up to, answer any questions folks have.
Sure. Thanks, Nancy. Good evening, Mayor, councilors. Yeah, I guess a few things I'll highlight. As Nancy mentioned, this is a continuation of the item we brought on June 17th. From that, we brought forward a recommendation from the council's Community Development Advisory Committee. They had 3 recommendations for funding. At that meeting, you supported one of those recommendations, which was the repayment of the city's Section 108 loan to HUD. We are in talks with HUD right now about paying that back. The other 2 recommendations you wanted more information on. And so that's why we're here tonight. The 2 recommendations I'll just highlight again, they're in your packet. And I'll just maybe step aside for a sec to say that CDBG funds are allocated towards strategies. They're not always allocated toward exact projects. And so then cities, as Nancy mentioned, sort of have that freedom to then sort of narrow down which projects specifically they want to and sort of figure out the amounts through further due diligence. So the recommendation that's coming to you tonight is a recommendation of strategies. It is to reallocate $305,000 away from a prior funded project toward just one strategy, which is to support a human services delivery system. As Nancy mentioned, 2 of those, away from the human services delivery system for two different strategies. One is again supporting a human services delivery system that could fund plazas renovations. It could also fund the ADA bathrooms, as Nancy mentioned. And then the other strategy that's put forward from the CDAC is to promote economic development through micro enterprise support. And that is through the partnership with LCC and supporting new in-home childcare businesses. So members of both LCC and Plaza are in the audience tonight for specific questions. Let me just breeze over if there's anything else.
And Aaron, we have 305,000 left after the loan that we're talking about.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So after that subtraction from 2 weeks ago, the recommendation from this Community Development Advisory Committee is about 259,000 towards supporting a human services delivery system, and then $46,063 to promoting economic development through micro enterprise businesses.
And roughly, do we know what the ADA restroom ask is?
We do not have we do not have details on that. So that is one of those projects we need additional due diligence on as well.
And the last question is, I know these funds are on a time frame. What is the date they have to be out the door at?
Mayor, I wish I had that for you. My conversations with HUD over the last year, there isn't a timeline tied to any $1, but there's a broader calculation tied to our overall allocation and what we have on hand. And so we have missed the bar that we need to be under for the last 3 years. And it's a continuing conversation with HUD around what that means and what we're doing. At the same time that HUD is putting forward rulemaking that says, we know we're not set up to help you meet timeliness for complicated projects. And so we are continuing to work with our HUD rep to have that conversation to say, we are putting forward a substantial amendment. We are reallocating funds. We are repaying our Section 108 loan. And so it's more of, are we doing everything we can to show them we're on the right path? It's a bit of a black box.
So if we are perceived as acting with a sense of urgency here, HUD will be fine.
That has been my argument.
Okay. Any other questions for Aaron before we have these folks up? Yep.
Just a quick one on the rehabilitation of stressed rental properties. Rebuild thing is, was there any thought given to that, or is that just?
So what was put forward through the Community Development Advisory Committee was that is a more complicated project. And so given the need to spend funds quickly, they were suggesting that we focus on eligible projects that could be spent more quickly and come back in the fall with more likely additional funding that will need to be reallocated and put that forward through an RFP in the fall. And so taking that time later, but still prioritizing.
So I just want to make sure, I mean, I can see it and it makes sense. I just didn't want it to go away and disappear into the twilight zone. So, okay, great. And then I support that ADA work on the bathrooms. And I also, and we're going to talk about that next topic when the economic development, if we can get more information on that.
All right. I think we're good, Aaron. So if we could have Marissa, do you want to come back up and then you can answer any questions we have for the Plaza project?
And then when we can, Aaron, on that childcare economic development, I got a few questions.
And I'll say they're members of LCC,
Yeah,
Lane
I see
Community
them.
College, who are here
I
as
see them
well.
back there,
So
that'd be great if we could. Thank you.
Thanks for being flexible here and let us put you on the spot.
Yes, of course. We're happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, sure. You're gonna try to make me find them now.
Do you want me to
No,
answer the ones you
I got
asked
it.
earlier first?
Yeah, no, I have them right here. I just wanted to see if this project you have in this brick and mortar place is open to all people.
Yes.
Not specifically a specific ethnicity, but, and I understand definitely the draw and who you want to attract. But I would have heartache if someone came in that because they don't speak Spanish would be turned away.
Yeah, and that's a great question. That's a really common question about our programs for our organization overall, since all of our programs are provided in Spanish. But every program, we are also open to anyone. In some programs that might be more limited. So in our business class, we're open to anybody who speaks Spanish because the class is taught in Spanish and we have had non-Latinos take the class. But in our recovery services and our mental health services, all of our staff are bilingual. And so we can serve English speakers, Spanish speakers, or people who need both languages, and we're happy to do so.
You totally answered my question and perfectly. Thank you so much. And then on the money that you're asking for, I actually haven't even looked at, not bad, but I forgot my iPad at home. The money that is being allocated for your program, is that being, how is it budgeted? Is it, just generally speaking, is it budgeted for the physical facility, or is it budgeted for ongoing operational costs? Or do you have a plan to make sure you can operate into perpetuity besides this money?
Yeah, the funds that we're asking for, they're to complete the project, meaning to complete construction and preparation of the space. However, we are asking for non-construction related costs. So meaning related to the construction project, but not the actual building of the new structure or painting or electricity or anything like that, because of their very strict parameters that will kick in with HUD funds for construction related expenses. So we've been very careful to select expenses that would not require that additional layer of diligence.
I think I know which layer you're talking. I agree.
And Plaza is fully funded operationally, so
Okay.
they'll be operating once it's done.
And then after you get it going, you have plans for future financing and stuff.
Yes.
Great. I love it. Go ahead.
Michelle.
I just have a follow-up question to that. So in our packet, it states that the city attorney's office is still reviewing CDBG requirements on which of the proposed costs are eligible. And that kind of is a little bit conflicting with what you're telling me or telling us. So if we could just get some clarification.
Yeah, I could just add,
Break that thing up and stand.
specifically on architectural costs, that was the initial question. Plaza is actually pretty far ahead in this project and is already contracted for an architect, which is lovely. It means this project is ready to go. And also there are CDBG requirements around procurement that we're sort of going back and forth with the city attorney to say, is architectural services eligible? We've been working with Justin to go over specific budgets to say they have enough need that are eligible for CDBG funds, that even if architectural services didn't end up qualifying, there's enough of $250,000 of need there. So correct, and it doesn't speak to the whole, yeah.
Christina, do you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think that's correct.
Outstanding. Are there, Victoria?
So first off, I just want to say thank you for bringing the information forward. I did a little research on this and the other project, and I think that one of the things sitting up here is a lot of people come to the council and they want the city to pay for stuff and they want them to run it and they want them to handle it. And I think that it's amazing that we have an organization in this community that is asking for some funds that are there, that are set aside, but are willing to do the work. And it's work that's so needed in our community and we are so lacking. And so I am 100% in support of both of these projects.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you so much for coming up and answering some additional questions. We're going to have the small business folks up next and see if we have any questions about that project.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. I'm Dan Collins. I'm the Director of the Small Business Development Center with Lane Community College.
And good evening. I'm Holly Marconte. I'm a child care sector strategist with Onward Eugene.
And so we're with a partnership of organizations that are carrying this together. And I want to be sure we share that because like you said, we're actually a work in progress. We're not asking for program funds. We're asking for something that's already in motion, but we are a partnership of organizations working to solve some of the child care desert crisis.
All right, Joe.
Yes, just a couple basic questions to get me over the hump. Correct me if I'm wrong. In my mind, what I have is there's money going to you folks that will go to individuals that want to start a business for childcare.
Yes.
Yes.
Basically.
Yes.
Second set is the recipients of those funds, are they all Springfield residents?
Yes.
Okay. You passed 2 tests so far. And secondly, can you describe to me what kind of overview, or I don't like to use the word supervision, what kind of auditing of those funds and how they're spent, and if they're spent appropriately, and if there is, what is a perceived outcome of that investment? And I'm assuming as to that you'll have a bunch of childcare businesses, but if you can just briefly run through that with me.
I can
Yeah.
address that on a couple different levels. So this is essentially replicating a program that the city of Eugene, excuse me, operates through their micro enterprise development program. So we have systems in place to make sure the dollars go directly to Springfield residents who complete the program. We have a system to ensure that they complete all of the courses, all of the coursework, go on to become licensed with the state of Oregon to run an in-home childcare center. Which can serve between 10 and 16 children per provider. And so there's a sort of a multiple levels of accountability, both at our organizational levels with our record keeping of who completes the programs, who gets the funding, as well as a robust accountability with the early learning department at the state level that monitors the childcare programs as well.
Yeah.
So you're not really seeing what the money is used to purchase in that.
Sure, absolutely. So each participant who goes through the program, opens a childcare business, is eligible for the $5,000 startup grants. Those are relatively flexible in the grants that we have awarded to date. They can provide startup operating cash. So if the provider is not fully enrolled, they may need some cash flow to get their business up and going before they have all 10 or 16 children in their care. It can go to small improvements if they need to add a fence, buy furniture for their program, curriculum, materials, et cetera.
Most of those who complete the program, it costs 10 to 20,000 of startup funds just to get going. And so we want to ensure that those who complete the program have an incentive to help them make it over the hump to actually open their center, which is what they went through the class to do. Most of them have a small childcare experience, but what we're trying to do is merge caring for children in a small, non-official way into a business, which is what the Small Business Development Center is with Onward Eugene, which is economic development, to create micro businesses in homes. And it's been going on for 3 years in Central Oregon. Those are the data points we're using. We're replicating the program here so we don't have to rebuild it, using the same data points, and it's successful.
And speaking of success, what percentage of success are you expecting with that investment?
Sure. So what we were told from Central Oregon is anything over 50% would be successful. Our first program that we ran had 82% success rate for graduation. Now, the first, we had 60 different people apply for 8 different spots. We were able to expand it to 20 because of the funds from City of Eugene. So we did have a large pool to choose from that we could select a little bit more selectively, even though I used that word twice in one sentence. But anything over 50%, it's a very rigorous program, and people end up dropping out or they don't have the qualifications. And so anything over 50%, they said is successful, and they've been mapping it for 3 years.
And just to give a little bit more context, we do live in a childcare desert. So that means that for every 3 children in our community, ages 0 to 5, there's 1 childcare slot. We're not unlike most other counties, most other states. We know in our community, we need to add about 1,500 childcare slots to move out of childcare desert status. And this is one of our most viable strategies to do that. If every provider can serve up to 16 children and we continue to run cohorts, we are chipping away at that overall deficit.
Yeah. I appreciate you indulging me, and I can say that I'm very comfortable supporting it, and I really wish great success, but I got to ask those questions for me to get to that hump.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yes,
absolutely.
absolutely.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Michelle.
Thanks. Counselor Pictionary and I are very much on the same track tonight with our just wanting to make sure we understand what we're supporting. I think my next couple of questions are probably for Aaron, actually, just kind of staff related clarification points here. So when we say funding will be monitored by city staff to the same level as the city's invoice reimbursement request process, what does that mean?
Sure. Asking a question that wasn't asked, I suppose. I guess to be a little clear on how the funds would be sort of delivered to each new business, it would be directly from the city to that new business. So it's not going through LCC, although they're a partner. And so to that question of how are we ensuring where the funds are ultimately, how are they being spent? Just like any invoice process the city has in terms of seeing the documentation, there is sort of the same process we would be following in terms of who is monitoring how the funds are being spent.
Okay, great. Thanks for just indulging me with that clarification. And then on the dollar amount, the 46,000, so we're supporting 8 at 5,000, right? So for 40, is the 6,000 administrative?
Yeah, and I actually think it went to 9. I think we'll talk about ultimately it'll depend on, I think there's 3 in the program. No, we're still at 8. Okay, great. Then yeah, we'll figure that out. I think staff admin will probably be less than that just based on the simplicity of it. I think there is room in that to move funds that minor.
All right, so we might have a
as
little
need be.
additional to support another adventure or venture if we need to or want to. Okay, great. Thank you.
Corey.
Thank you. I want to say to Aaron, first of all, thank you for doing this work and doing it repeatedly. So I really appreciate that. As everyone up here knows that I have been supportive of this and have been a fan from the get-go. And I just wanted to take a few moments to say that I appreciate us looking at new and creative ways to support this work in Springfield. And I know that, you know, I sense from my colleagues' questions that it feels a little bit wiggly, and yet it also is really exciting to have services that are culturally specific services that are, you know, supporting micro enterprises and that affect the lives of women in our communities. That these things I think are really important. And it's exciting to see us lean into that in Springfield, even if it feels a little bit uncomfortable. So I appreciate folks taking the time to move along. So thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, the one question I did have was on that invoicing process. So if it's going from us to the, I don't know, student, for lack of a better word, individual entrepreneur, are we having to do, like, we're managing that whole process? So what happens if for some reason they graduate and then we send the money and then the business sort of fails to launch?
I think it's sort of slightly different, but when I first started at the city was using CDBG funds to fund micro enterprise, similar to this. But the way they were doing that is that they were giving funding to Dev Northwest or then Nedco to help individuals go through a program to decide if they wanted to start a business. So in some ways, the way HUD views it is as sort of an investment in the possibility of a new business. And so in that same way, there is no requirement that their business be in place for 5 years or that business be, it's just sort of, they went through the program, they qualify. We're partnering with a group that believes they will be successful and provide support for 6 months after the program. And in that sense,
so we're not going to end up in a position where we have sort of city staff having like CDB having to go out and sort of try to recover funds because CDBG is, the regulations are tough sometimes.
Right. So in that lens of saying what is a program that we can support without sort of onerous regulations, this I would say falls under that aim.
Okay. Perfect. That was the question I had. I think thank you for coming up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any other questions, or I think we're ready for a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the proposed substantial amendments to the Community Development Block Grant Fiscal Year 2022 Annual Action Plan and authorize the city manager to execute all documents needed to give effect to the city's agreement with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for these funds.
I'll second that.
Neil, could you call the vote, please?
Yes, Counselor Weber.
Yes.
Counselor Mo.
Yes.
Counselor Rodley.
Yes.
Counselor Blackwell.
Yes.
Counselor Doyle.
Aye.
And Counselor Pictionary.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes, 6 yeses, 0 nos. Next item, please.
Next
Thanks,
item
Aaron.
is Springfield Land Acquisition Funding. Katie Carroll and Aaron Fifield are here for this item.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Katie Carroll, Housing Analyst for the city with Aaron Fifield. This item that's coming back to you tonight is a process that would allow the city to allocate one-time ARPA funds to developers as forgivable loans to buy land that will be developed with income qualified housing to serve households with low incomes, and that's up to the 80% AMI level or area median income. That ARPA funding came to the city via an intergovernmental agreement with the county and is specifically for land acquisition to serve households with low incomes. The city has used some of those funds to buy property at 16th and Main and has approximately $900,000 left that needs to be spent by December 2025. Staff proposed this process in order to allow us to focus on making other city-owned properties available for housing development. And this would not preclude us from using funds as long as there's some remaining and we should find a property that we want. So that's still possible under this process. In April, when we brought this to you in a work session, we brought you some draft guidelines for the application process and then some questions for council direction. At that meeting, council directed staff to make funds available for mixed income projects that require at least 51% of units to be available to households with low incomes, again, up to the 80% area median income level. Council also directed staff to limit home ownership projects to those that will have a singular ownership for the land, such as a manufactured home park or a land trust. And that was based on staff's recommendation, as this will make monitoring those projects over time much easier because that funding from the county requires a 20-year affordability period. Following that meeting, we also met with the finance department to talk about suitable loan default terms for this funding. And then let's see, so attachment 2 in your packet is a copy of the updated guidelines that has highlights showing significant changes that were made since you saw this in April based on that input from the council and from the finance department. And those have also been reviewed by the city attorney's office. And then just last thing, quick process reminder on this. So this would be a rolling application process. Applications would be reviewed by multiple staff members against a set of criteria. And then projects that are found eligible would require some additional due diligence before actually funding those, and then progress reports between the funding and when those get leased up to make sure that someone's actually making progress towards building housing there. And with that, I'll turn it back over.
Any questions? I guess the one thing that I wanted to just call out, right, because is when this funding's gone, the program's sort of set to close. Is that accurate?
I mean, theoretically, if there was other one-time funding or the council wanted to allocate CDBG funds towards land acquisition in the future, then, but otherwise at this point, no, we don't have other funding.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to provide forgivable loans to developers to acquire land to develop income qualified housing serving low income households.
Second.
Neil, could you call the vote, please?
Yes, Councilor Weber,
Yes.
Councilor Mo,
Yes.
Councilor Rodley,
Yes.
Councilor Blackwell,
Yes.
Councilor Doyle,
Aye.
and Councilor Pictionary.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes, 6 yeses, 0 nos. Next item, please.
Thank you.
Any other business from the city manager?
I do have a few things. Thank you. Mayor and council, I really appreciate your hard work. We threw a lot of work at you tonight and you went through it and you handled it. So thank you. And get to take a well-deserved break. I also want to thank our staff for how hard they work in getting materials ready. Neil for all of the things that he did with the ESF merger, Nathan as well. Certainly both Katie and Aaron for these are complicated issues that we all are working through. And I feel really great about the work that you guys all got done. I want to leave you on your break with a piece of great news that I can announce that tomorrow we will be going live with a new webpage. and new look. I'm super thrilled about it. I think everybody, I can hear the clap around the community. And I am very thrilled to be able to check this particular task off my list that came up 4 years ago in the interview process. So I just want to thank all of the staff that was involved with that. Way too long of a list to do tonight, but so we didn't launch it because we wanted to make sure people could still get this link tonight and access the meeting. So starting tomorrow, you will see that. So you can have that piece of good news to take into recess.
Joe,
That's awesome. That's great news. So Neil, Assistant City Manager Neil Adati, when did we start talking about the website? Can you recall? I know it's
I think it was the early 80s, Counselor.
I have not been on this council for 100 years. So that's been a while.
There's been a couple of updates, but the major one was when we were hiring the new city manager.
Yes,
And that was the push. So yes,
that's great.
it's good to see this.
Yeah, good job. Thank you.
Any other?
Oh, no further business.
Okay, any business from the city attorney?
I do have a couple items tonight. One, sorry, be quick. There's one new opioid settlement, class action settlement with Kroger, and the city has to opt in August in order to have that participate in that. We have not filed a lawsuit similar to other class action settlements that we've done before. The city manager has the authority to opt in. There's no decision for the council to make or any litigation to dismiss. So I just wanted to let you know. And then once we have more information about it, there's just not a lot of information right now. And then the second item, just quickly, is I'm sure you all know that the Supreme Court made a decision involving the Rents Pass case, and we'll be getting something in writing to you about implications for that.
all right. Well, I just want to second the, the thanks for all the hard work the staff has done over about the last month. This 1,100-page packet was about the third one we had in a row that were in between 800 and 1,100 pages. May and June have been absolutely packed, and I think we're all grateful for the support you guys have given us through this. And again, thanks for the council. You guys held it together and stayed in there for, it's been a long June. So enjoy your summer vacation, and it's well deserved. We are adjourned. We will see you in September.